Welcome to another episode of the Live Happy, Healthy, and Inspired podcast. The podcast all about inspiring good health, living life fully, and chasing your dreams. In this episode, Amanda Monk shares her wisdom on building healthier, more fulfilling relationships, whether they're romantic, platonic, or professional. As a shadow alchemist and intimacy coach, Amanda dives deep into her four-step erotic blueprint to help you create a deeper connection with yourself and others. After listening to this episode, you'll be able to understand the role of shadow work in uncovering hidden relationship patterns, how intimacy begins with vulnerability and self awareness, practical steps to enhance communication and trust in all types of relationships, and Amanda's four-step erotic blueprint for greater emotional and physical connection. Make sure to listen all the way to the end, where Amanda shares her most important piece of advice for creating and maintaining healthy, loving relationships. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Brad, as always. And just a quick announcement again, this is now the Live Happy, Healthy, and Inspired podcast, formerly the Be Well, Be Safe, Be Happy, Eat Ice Cream podcast. But as I like to say, same great show, same great content, and same great guests. So with us today, coming from Wyoming, is Amanda. Amanda, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Brad. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, and so we were chatting a little bit off camera, and I was reading a little bit about your information on your website and all that. You are an intimacy and relationship coach. And one of the things I wanted to start off today with, and why I wanted you on the show, was this idea of relationships. I know everybody is always interested, what makes a healthy relationship? What is a healthy relationship? I know for certainly me, we won't get into my story or my situation with any of that, because I am definitely not the walking example there when it comes to relationships. But let's just kind of start off there, Amanda, with relationships and go from there. And what can you tell us? What are some keys, secrets, I guess, to relationships and making relationships work? And I guess I should say romantic relationships, but really
Mhm.
relationships of any kind with your boss or with your sister or something like that.
Yeah, thank you. I wish there was a single magic bullet, and the reality is there's not. There's
Yeah.
not. And so, as I've progressed further and further into this work and into just my own experience of relating and relationships, what I can say is the closest thing to the big thing to figure out, to practice with, to understand. And this sounds so cliche, but its reality is you really have to deeply understand and love yourself.
Yes.
You really do. As cliche as it sounds. And I want to go into more of that because that can mean a lot of things,
Okay.
right? Like there's a lot of story around like you have to be healed before you can enter a relationship, and that's also not real. And so anybody that has believed in a story or taken on from somebody else that you can't be in a relationship until you've got yourself totally figured out and everything's perfect and you're totally healed, that's not real.
I don't even know if that's possible to be totally healed and completely.
It's not.
Yeah, maybe you need the relationship to heal more to figure yourself out more, but to be completely healed, I don't even know if that's possible.
It's I anytime somebody tells me they're healed with an ED at the end, I always that always raises a little flag for me because it's really an ongoing process. That's part of life is our continual development and healing. So in relationships, and I'm speaking mostly to women here when I say this, we've so often been brought up to believe that we're not complete until we are in a relationship and that we are um, better off when we're partnered. And that tends to force us into seeing the world through this lens of how do I get somebody to love me and accept me and want me? How do I get chosen? And that is, in my opinion, one of the biggest detriments to relationships that I see in adult women now. So most of my clients are between like 35 to 60
That's
and female clients, you too. And so a lot of them have already had a major relationship, whether it's a relationship that ended in a divorce or something that was long term that didn't work out. And there's a few key things that are really important when I say like learning how to deeply understand yourself and love yourself. You have to understand how to show up as your true self and authenticity in a relationship without abandoning yourself to the other person. And that is a really big process of healing, and it's different for every single individual.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
Let me just, so just to back up real quick, you mentioned something that's really important, that a lot of women view the world through this lens that they have to be in a relationship to be complete. The same is also true for men, and I'm a shining example of that. Just this is one of my limiting beliefs that I just cleared up really within the last, I'd say, 6 months, maybe even 3 months. As a single male, I thought for my life to be fully complete, to be fully thriving at the highest level, I had to be in that relationship. And so I was trying to get into, again, we won't get into my situation with relationships, but I thought to be thriving at the highest level of life that I had to be in a relationship. And from a male perspective, that's not true. And now what I'm hearing also from a female perspective, that's not true. And so what like lens should women, and I can offer a male point of view, but what lens should women be viewing the world through when it comes to all of this stuff, I guess?
Mm, thank you for sharing that. I do work with men too, and I find this applies to both. You're right.
Yeah.
Um, I find it's a little different for men, and can't speak as a man. So I really appreciate you voicing your opinion and your point of view here as well. Um, the lens for women, and this takes in a lot that I don't I don't want to go into a ton of detail here for the sake of time, but a lot of it is this like conditioning from places of like society, like we're dressing for what we think is going to be attractive to a man, or we are choosing lifestyle choices that makes us more palatable. And so that is really what I mean about like, if you're coming from a place, a lot of times it's subconscious. It's not a choice you're making on purpose. Sometimes you are conscious of it, but you don't know how to do it differently. And so the same might apply for men too. And that like, how can this make me more attractive? How can this make me more dateable? How can this make me, more attractive to a future husband or wife? And it's really costing you your authenticity. And so when we lose sight of what we desire and what we want in our life, in a relationship, what we feel good wearing, what we feel good eating, what we feel good doing and spending our time doing, when you're in that place, you are in a natural place of satisfaction, of happiness. And that is really heart opening, right? And this is putting aside work that needs to be done around any kind of pain or traumas or anything that you've experienced. Like that's a secondary piece to what I'm sharing now, because it still applies. But when you can show up in ways that are pleasing to you as the individual, and you're in, I don't know, call it happiness, your light is shining, your heart is open, that's when you're likely to meet somebody who is going to see you for who you are, as opposed to a mask that you're wearing, putting on, trying to be chosen.
Yeah, that keyword, yeah, trying. You're trying to get in a relationship. Let me ask you this, and for men or women, I guess, and I'll be very curious your answer. How do I know when it's right to get into a relationship, or when I should? You mentioned that we're never totally healed, and I told there's that word totally. I totally agree with that. Uh, but there's, I think, a certain amount of healing that does need to take place before you just jump into another relationship. So how do I know when it's okay or when I should get back out there and be in a relationship when it's healthy? Because one of the mistakes I've made is I realized like I was, I guess, bringing some of my bad energy into the situation and then passing it off on her, which was not fair to her. And then not, oh, I realized, oh, so I guess a follow-up question then would be, what are relationships really all about? Because I realized, oh,
Mm.
I'm making it about this, and that's not right at all for from a male perspective. So I don't know what's
Yeah,
your
great
thought?
questions. So, when is it right to be in the relationship? Um, Again, going to be a little different for each person.
Yeah.
You're going to be ready to be in a relationship when you're showing up from a place of, how do I put this into words? When you're not looking for somebody else to feel complete.
Yeah, that was huge for me. I was for the longest time. I thought I needed someone else to be complete, and I turned out that wasn't true.
And you may have to experience that or do the healing of that through a relationship, which is
Yeah,
the irony. Why I'm like, it's
yeah,
different for every person.
yeah,
And so we don't always have this crystal clear awareness of like, what's motivating me to want to be in a relationship. So we can get into things like, am I coming from a place of codependency or like a triggered attachment style of like, I just am lonely and I need somebody and I need to not be with myself. I need to not face myself. That's not a time for a relationship. And yet, sometimes we end up in relationships in those times, and it's those relationships that mirror back to us that, oh, wow, I must not be ready for this relationship.
that's what was happening to me exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
a quick stab at my own question, and what I realized through my situations is I would answer my own question is literally when it feels right. And the hard part of that was I was not being honest with myself.
Mm,
And I think that's key. Any situation is and I've said that through any type of journey to show up. You know, we talk about showing up most authentically is when I'm being honest. I have to be honest with myself first. And I think for anyone listening, if you're going to jump into a relationship, ask yourself, am I ready for this? Because there's a lot to a relationship. It's just not showing up, having dinner, and I think that applies for men and women. There's a lot that goes into that energy wise. So does it feel right in terms of jumping in? And I realize looking back now, for me, it did not.
mm. And sometimes we can only see that in hindsight,
Yeah,
right? And that's okay. That's part of the journey. I think too, there's a need to not put pressure on the relationship that this has to be long term or this has to be forever. And so if you can approach a
I did
new
that too. Yeah,
person,
I made that mistake also. Yeah,
right? We're projecting these beliefs onto this other human. And or even if you think of it this way, when I coach couples, I always tell them in the beginning, I'm like, I'm coaching three entities here. I'm coaching you, and I'm coaching person number two, and I'm coaching the third entity, which is the relationship, which is the combination of the two of you and all of your projections into it. And so the thing that's really important, I would say there's three pieces to this, like getting into a relationship, really deeply understand who am I and what do I want? What do I want in this life? What would I want in a relationship? Not what do I want them to be? Not here's my grocery shopping list of I want them to be this tall and have this color eyes and dress this way. I'm not talking about those superficial things, and I don't mean to diminish them. Attraction is very important. That's a whole other podcast. However, how do I want to feel when I'm with this person? You need to understand those things for yourself. I call them relationship tenants or dating tenants, and I help clients work these out because if you can understand these milestone or because I think of it like a trail, like we're on a hiking trail, and how do I want to feel at the beginning at the start of the trail? It's like when I'm in this person's presence, how do I know I want to date them? Because of how I feel, not because of the checklist, not because of something that's in my head, but it's something that's almost like a somatic, it's a body feel. How do I feel around this person?
let me jump in real quick because this is where the male and female energies can really clash. Because a man will come into the relationship all about sex. You know, let's be honest, that's a high level, and the woman comes in all about connection and you know that not sexual intimacy, but connection type intimacy. And so how do you right from the get go? It's like these two energies are clashing. So how does
Feels
that?
like there's different goals.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So oftentimes when the way that a man wants to feel, because I don't feel like this is specific to gender, if a man wants to feel turned on in the presence of the woman that he wants to date, he needs to be looking for that. He needs to recognize, how do I feel in the presence of this woman? Right. We're, of course, speaking to hetero relationships here, but it could apply to any relationship. How do I want to feel with this partner? Do I want to feel turned on, lit up? Do I want to feel like I can sense their eroticism as a natural part of who they are and how they just move around the world? And that might be something that's really important. It might also be, do I feel like I have the right amount of attraction to this person? Do I feel a magnetic sense like I'm drawn into them? Am I curious? about them, and that curiosity might be coming from a physical place, from a desire, sexual desire. But a lot of times too, when I've worked with men, men can sometimes even mistake sexual desire for just genuine attraction, right? And I feel like, to men's point, it so often as women are ridiculed for wanting to have the shopping list and the security and the men and the connection, men are often ridiculed for just wanting attraction and fun in a relationship, and it gets to be all of it. Neither are wrong for that. It's really about understanding the boundaries with each other and knowing when the timing for that level of intimacy is right for both of you. Right. And I'm absolutely coming from a place of zero judgment, which is not a place I was coming from like 5, 6 years ago, where I had a lot of judgment around, oh, you have to wait until this number of dates before you can become intimate or whatnot. And I've since thrown all that out the window. And sometimes I will want to date somebody for months before I'm ready to have that level of intimacy with them. And sometimes I find that that's something that can come very quickly. And so it really depends on how I feel with the person. So speaking for myself, one of the things I'm looking for in a partner when I'm with them early on, when I'm meeting them, getting to know them, is, can I be curious about them? I want to feel curious. I want to know the depths of them. I want to recognize myself that I'm leaning into somebody. I'm like, oh, I want to know all these things about them. That's a good sign for me. I want to have some level of attraction to them, but it might not be like, visceral, instinctual, sexual desire. It might just be, I sense that I want to be closer in proximity to them. I just
How can a man
want to have that.
appreciate and understand that? Because a man will
It,
come in just, the sexual, it's all about sex for a man. So how can a man understand that more and appreciate that more? How can a woman communicate that more to a man, I guess, too?
these are great questions, but they're not simple, short answers.
Yeah, okay.
How can a man show up in a more balanced way with their sexual desire is really about a man doing work for themselves on being able to hold their capacity of their own sexual desire. And so I call this learning to expand your erotic capacity. And so often and I just had the pleasure of giving a talk on this in Toronto a couple of weeks ago. It was my first international speaking gig. And I did a whole talk on this because it's not a quick thing. This is the work, this is the development. So learning how to recognize your own desire, your own erotic desire. And eroticism means a lot of things, but it definitely includes sex. And not feeling the sense that I have to do something about this right now. Like, similar to joy, when we feel an intense joy, oftentimes it comes with a foreboding feeling like, what do I do with this excitement? And so Brene Brown does a lot of work around how joy can feel foreboding, where it's like, I can't stay in this energy because I'm afraid of what happens when it goes away. And so our sexual desire, that energy when we get lit up and we're turned on, learning how to hold that in your body as a fuel or as just a feeling is going to help not feel like you need to act on it. Right? Just like when we learn how to be patient, and instead of being demanding, I want this, I want it now, and I'm going to have a meltdown if I don't get my way, like a child does, because they're still learning these concepts of patience and developing skills about permanence. The same thing can happen when we get really practiced in, this is a bit of a somatic practice, so it's learning how to hold it in the body. How do I learn how to channel that energy in a different way so I don't feel like I have to just go for it and get what I want, but actually use it and be curious about it? And so there's whole practices on that. And we could go into, like I said, a whole nother podcast about how do I do that? How do I build that skill? But it really is something that you learn to build over time. And I think too, as far as the second part of your question, I think both men and women need to be able to communicate this effectively in a relationship and dating, which is, again, another skill. So if you can learn first to understand it, what is it? What is it in me? What do I desire? How do I desire it? How do I want to be spoken to? How do I want to be touched? And this is both sexual and non-sexual. How do I want to be touched? How do I want to be supported? If you understand that about yourself, which is an internal journey first, and then learn how to start communicating that, which is a practice, which can feel really scary because there's vulnerability. There's vulnerability to saying, I want this, or I want you this way, or I want experiences with you.
Especially for a man, yeah, because we're not supposed to be vulnerable.
Yeah. And for women too, because vulnerability is often met with pain or rejection,
Oh,
right? Like, oh, you're asking for something that is too much, or I can't meet that, or you're expecting too much. Because a woman's want to build up that desire in the relationship might start from a place that feels very non-sexual, but it's part of what is building that turn on for her so that she can meet the man where he may or may not already be. And for him, and this is where the erotic blueprints come in as a really cool guide. The erotic blueprints are kind of like the 5 love languages. Most people have heard of that, but it's a spicier version. But it is this framework that helps you understand your unique mix of what is your turn on? What's it made of? There's 5 blueprints, and they are energetic, sensual, sexual, kinky, and shapeshifter. And each one of those has, it's a framework, so it has some definition around it. And it's a great starting place. And it gives a common language. And so for couples that are struggling in that area of the relationship, like I want this and you don't want that yet, or I want this and you want something different, a lot of times we label that as incompatibility when it's really not. It's just a need to be curious about each other and understand each other a little differently, communicate, learn how to feed each other's blueprints in a way that can really build that turn on. So for example, to one of your questions earlier, how do we approach that when the man is coming in and really desiring sex and the woman is coming in and desiring intimacy and safety first? That's really a dance of communication and checking in with each other. And so as the woman feels more safe to be open, that's really more of opening up to the man. And the man needs to be willing to be that safe space for the woman. And I'm not talking
how can a
about,
man do that, or how can a man make a woman feel more safe? And can you kind of define safe? Because I know,
yes,
like when I hear that word, I immediately think physical. Like, I'm not
yes.
gonna, physically do anything, but
I'm
there's
not going to harm you
yeah, there's
physically.
more to it than
Yeah.
that. So can you kind of explain safety and how can a man make a woman feel safe?
Yes. And I would say like the condensed answer to that is a man really needs to ask the woman, what can I do to make you feel safe? Because it's going to be different for every woman.
So we can
And
just ask
so
that question. Okay.
absolutely can ask it as a question. And women that isn't familiar with her own sense of like a regulated nervous system and safety might not be able to answer it really clearly right away. And so an answer to like, how can you make me how could you make me feel safe? It might be an answer might be slow down, slow things down. Or I really can appreciate, I can feel that you desire me physically, which is really amazing. And it's going to take me a little while to settle into that. So can you agree that we can take our time in the relationship? And you agreeing to that and saying, yes, I'll respect that, creates safety.
Um,
And so it's about honoring each other's boundaries, communicating with each other about the boundaries. And women need to help men feel safe too in the relationship. It's not just a man's job to do
I
that.
agree 100% with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So for a man to express something that feels vulnerable to him, the safety of the woman saying, I hear you, I see you, I receive that, and I love you still, I love you more for it, is creating safety. And that is also a great example of intimacy. It's that vulnerability that was expressed and received. And that is this like, oh, I'm safe here. I can open up more. I can lean into this. I'm going to be okay. That is
Oh,
building intimacy over time.
okay. So how does a woman make a man feel safe then? Or how does a woman ask a man the same question or?
It depends on the man, because a lot of men, when I've witnessed that question being asked, they bristle. Like, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
need you to make me feel safe. I'm the one who makes you feel safe, right?
Because we're thinking physical. we're thinking muscle, self-defense, all that type of thing. We're not thinking on an
Yeah.
emotional level at all.
And so the safety really is it's I look at the safety in at least three factors, and there's more subtleties to it, but physical is absolutely one. And that again, when I said at the beginning, like putting things kind of over here in a box right now around like trauma or past experience or pain. So physical safety might be the most important for someone who's come from a relationship where that was breached. And
Yeah,
so that can well be part of what makes somebody feel safe.
yeah.
Secondly, is going to be psychological safety. So when we hear people talk about things like, oh, I feel manipulated or gaslit, or it's about honesty, respect, boundaries, communication. And then the last would be, let's see, I had it and then I lost it.
Oh,
So
that's
physical, psychological, and emotional safety.
emotional. I was almost
And
trying.
that is really, I'm going to share something with you that feels scary. And you say, I've got you. I'm not going to judge you for that. Or I'm here, I'm going to hear this out. You're safe to tell me. That is an example of creating emotional safety. So it's really about that person saying, this is really scary for me, which can overlap with psychological, right? Um, I'm going to open up and be vulnerable and say something scary. And I need to know that you're not going to reject me for it. Or I need to know that you're not going to judge me for it and tell me I'm a bad person.
That's tough from a male perspective too. I had an interesting conversation with a female colleague of mine about chasing women, and we agreed to disagree on that. But it's this idea men don't do a lot of that anymore because of the fear of rejection. And then we're told in the male world, we'll just deal with it or get over it. And it's like, well, easy to say from your point of view, but from our point of view, not so much. But let me kind of back up a little bit and ask this because this is fascinating. Maybe we'll go well over our half-hour mark here today. Do you have time? Are you
I
okay?
do.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Well, let's say I'm either a male or female in any type of relationship. Well, let's say I've done a lot of inner work. It feels right now. I'm ready to get into a relationship. How do I approach all of this then? Like, how do I show up in the world? Like, just show up. Like, I've done the work. I'm ready. Hey, okay, here comes someone, or I don't know what. How do I, like, I guess, get started? I guess is my
How
question.
do I get started? Oh, good
Yeah,
question. So if you've done some of the work, you're able to show up in your authenticity.
yeah.
You know it's going to be a little scary and you're ready for that. Then it's about putting yourself out there. And there's a lot of ways to do that. I'm personally not a huge fan of dating apps because I find it creates a lot of barriers, right, to authenticity. And so also, I'll just be honest, like this is one of my personal biggest challenges because I live in a really small town, kind
Yeah.
of removed from a lot of activities and places where people gather. So that's I say this from a place of like I understand it can feel challenging at times, but it really is about creating opportunities to meet like-minded people. So if you know I'm ready to be in a relationship and you've done that work where you're like, and I have a pretty good idea of the kind of person or the kind of commonalities I might have with this person. Like if you're somebody who's like, I really want to meet somebody who's going to love coming to church with me, then I'd be frequenting church and I'd be potentially looking for somebody that's going to be in places that has that common value, right? If I'm like, I really want to be with somebody who loves to be outdoors, then I'm going to need to be in places where that common value and interest is going to be obvious for both of us.
Hiking groups and various church groups. And,
And online groups too are a great option.
yeah,
You can
yeah.
meet somebody through, a Facebook group on a common interest, like a hiking group. And I'm not a fan of doing a hike on a first date because I'm like, I don't really want to be alone in the woods with somebody I don't know.
The safety
But I
thing.
do it in a group. Absolutely would love to go on a
Yeah,
group hike with somebody as a first date.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's strange. I've actually had women say, "Hey, let's go on a hike for our first date," and I'm like, "You really want to do that? Okay." But I mean, but the group thing too. But it's interesting. As a male, I've yeah, the dating apps I've completely shunned and given up on all of that. I'm off Facebook dating now and none of that. But I realized my real world, and I don't even know what to call it, approach skills, pickup skills, I don't even know what to call it, have completely like sank or tarnished or any of that. Like,
Falling out.
yeah, it's like, you if you have use it or lose it type thing. If you have a skill, it's like a foreign language. If you learn a foreign language but you never use it, like most of my Japanese I've forgotten now. It's like it just hit me like a ton of bricks because I finally got off the Facebook dating about a month ago, and I just took 2 weeks to chill. And I'm like, you know what? I don't even really know how to do this in the real world. So
I understand that completely. I think
yeah,
it can
it's
be
crazy.
I think it can be one of those things, like you said, it's a skill, and we, all of us, have to get comfortable with not doing it perfectly, right? And it's
It's
that
where,
authenticity
yeah,
with people
yeah.
that when I'm looking to date and I'm in a place where I'm like, okay, I'm at the county fair or I'm at some kind of singles mixer type situation. I'm not looking for the person who has the best pickup line, honestly. What I'm looking for, and this is coming from practicing what I preach, how do I feel around this person?
Yeah.
Which is not something that person can really control. It's about a lot of subtleties. And that's why I preach so much, like learning how to be really comfortable in your skin and your authentic self is so important to this process. So that when you are meeting somebody from the get-go, you really are being true to yourself. And the people who are drawn into that, who find that attractive, those are your people. That's your dating niche. And the people who want you to be more of something or less of something, that's not your dating niche. Those aren't your people.
Mm,
You don't need to be more of something or less of something than you are to be with a person that is a right match for you.
yeah. Let me ask real quick. We mentioned rejection a little bit earlier. What are your tips for dealing with rejection, whether you're a man or a woman? Because I know from a male point of view, what little skill I have, either online or real world, it's tough to get rejected and be rejected all the time. And I know there's, if and maybe answer, are we men still supposed to chase women, or what does that look like, or any of that? But it's this idea of, the rejection piece. It's easy to be on your side when you can do the rejecting versus being rejected. But so how can men and women better deal with that aspect from all of this?
Mm. That's a tricky one. I mean, as far as rejection in general, and this goes back to, I think the same thing applies in business when you're making sales too, right? Is you're learning how to not make it about you and something that's wrong with you. So if you see rejection, a lot of the things that I've studied around rejection are to immerse yourself in it
Mm,
so that you can learn
done
to
that.
receive it, right? Without, it's like practice getting no's, practice getting the no's, and to a point where I've even, heard people suggest gamifying it. Like, how many times can I get rejected? So that it shifts the energy around it. So it's not about somebody judging me is not enough. But instead seeing it as I have the audacity to try. And I get points every time I try, even if I'm shot down,
Oh,
even if it's a no. And so the more I try, the better I get at this. And
oh, good.
what if it ends up being a yes? And I'm like, now what do I do with it?
I
Right?
know that's scary. Yeah, what if she does say yes? Yeah, then what? You're
Oh no. She said
they
yes.
said
Now
you're
what?
supposed to say no. Now what? Yeah, I'm not used to a yes.
Yeah. And so it's really about practicing that. And once you become kind of it's something that doesn't sting the way it did because you no longer take it as a personal rejection of who you are. And you just see it as it because that no might be so many things. It might be not right now. It might be I'm just coming out of something and I'm not ready. It
Yeah,
might be
all of that too.
um, I'm still in all of my BS in my head and you don't match my shopping list. And so it really so often has nothing to do with you. It's the
And
other person.
and I think that holds true for men and women. And that's another limiting belief I had to clear up in my life. I thought a lot of the rejection I get was all about me and my fault and all that. But you're right. Oftentimes, rejection has nothing to do with me. It has to do
Mhm.
with what's going on in that other person's world. I think that is true for men and women. What would Would you agree? Or
Absolutely. Women get rejected constantly, just like men do. And so, but it's in oftentimes a slightly different context.
mm,
And so, and there is a lot of dogma around, are men supposed to approach women? Are women allowed to approach men? And I have an opinion around that. I don't know what the right answer is because I really feel like it's very personal. And so, personally, I don't have a rule about that. I would love, just the same as in a business perspective, I'd be willing to approach somebody that I'm interested in doing business with or getting to know better, whether, regardless of their gender. Like, I'm curious about this part of you. I want to know more about this. I'm inviting you into conversation about it.
mm,
And so that can be the beginning of any relationship. Oftentimes, the relationships that have a really strong base didn't start from the intention of, I want to date you. It came from the intention of, I'm curious about you. Something about you is pulling me in. I'd like to know more.
that is so true, and I think that's why a big reason dating apps don't work because we go into it trying to make a relationship happen, and every relationship that I've had that was, I'll say healthy, even if it ended after X amount of time, occurred very organically, just a complete raw, very unexpected, natural conversation that just kind of went from there. And then every time I've tried to like make it happen, in terms of a relationship, it always crashes and burns. So there's something about just allowing it to happen versus trying to make a relationship happen. I don't know. What do you?
Absolutely. You're totally on to something there. Yeah. The trying to make it is coming from a place of, if it doesn't work, it failed.
Yeah,
Like, there's already a context of that put
yeah,
onto the getting to know each other.
yeah.
Like, can we force this? Can we make it work like this? And we're going to make it work. And there's certainly times where relationships do feel like work because I got to be more vulnerable, or I need to apologize, or I need to be willing to see a point of view that's not my own. And that can feel hard. And that's what I think is the work when we say relationships can be hard work.
Yeah.
But that applies from the beginning. And there's, a lot of really, really long standing dogma that a relationship that ends is a failure, which I also don't subscribe to that. Relationships are meant to come to completion. Some of them will last very, very, very long. And what completes it might be one of the people passes away in the relationship.
Mm,
And some relationships are meant just for a short period of time. There's a lot of learning in it, and it's complete. It's done. It's expired. The learning's done. We're complete. We get to move on. And it doesn't mean I failed or you failed or we screwed it up. The screw ups are the learning in the process. And
yeah.
the more we learn to own our own shit in the relationship, the more likely we are to be able to have a ending that isn't, villainized.
Yeah. Wow, that's good stuff. Amanda, let me kind of start to wrap this up here. But what would be some of your best tips as far as relationships go? Like either
Mhm.
getting into one or helping one to stay healthy or being in one or yeah, what if you could give two or three just awesome pieces of advice, what would they be?
Yeah. The first one is to get curious, regardless of what point in the relationship you're in the beginning or the end. If you start to come from the mindset of curiosity instead of having already drawn conclusions,
Mm,
um, there's way more chance of having more connection in a relationship.
okay.
The second one is to be playful. We
Playful.
get so damn serious about relationships. We get so serious about it, and we forget that we're here to play. We're here to experience fun things together, joy together, right? And then the last piece is to constantly be working on your level of vulnerability.
Mm,
As far as, I'm willing to be open to this other person being vulnerable to me and receiving them as a human who is a conscious being in this world, and they are going through things and they're learning and they're imperfect and they're growing. And on the other side of that, I'm willing to also be the one to say the scary things and be vulnerable, open up. So if you can really be in those three things where you're checking in, am I being curious? Can I be playful in this moment? And that applies to everything. Playful in having a good time together, learning about each other. The sexual intimacy in the relationship being playful, and then the vulnerability in the end.
Let me throw in one more and just get your thoughts on this. So, one thing I've learned about relationships and life is that relationships are an amazing opportunity or are a mirror, so to speak, to show us who we are. So, when I'm in a relationship and something happens to me that I become, agitated or frustrated or even happy, that's to me, that's a mirror being reflected back to me. So, a powerful question I've learned to ask myself with regards to relationship is, I take a step back. Okay, I showed up, whatever, agitated, whatever. What does this say about me? And so, doing that inner work, asking that question, what does this say about me? Because I think relationships, whether it's a romantic or with a family member or at work, a coworker, will show you your authentic self.
Absolutely.
And okay, is this the part of my authentic self I want to bring forth to the relationship and to the world? If yes, then move full speed ahead. But if no, that question, what does this say about me? Why is this happening? Why am I getting agitated? Because ultimately, this is what I'm still learning. Again, I'm not healed. I'm in the process
You're
of healing.
healing.
I'm healing. I'm learning uh, that there are parts of what I'll say authentic self that just don't work for me and don't serve for me, but they keep showing up, and that relationship keeps mirroring that back to me. So I've got to understand better what's going on there. So I would just add doing that inner work to see what is going on within you that is, allowing you or causing you to show up in a certain way. So I don't know, thoughts real quick on
Yeah.
that, and then
Oh, that's great. To me, that's an extension of curiosity.
yeah, okay,
Like,
okay.
oh, here I am feeling triggered. I'm upset in
So being
something.
curious about yourself, not just the other person. Okay, I didn't
Yeah,
even think of that.
both. What is it that, what's going on here?
Yeah,
Owning my stuff. Like, wow, I'm really being a jerk right now. What's going on? And then recognizing, oh, under that behavior, which is probably me trying to protect myself from something,
yeah,
where am I hurt? Or what am I afraid of right now? What am I getting really curious about that? And then also getting curious about the other person and what they're experiencing in that too. Because sometimes those things when we're agitated are coming from a pattern, and the relationship is always a mirror. You're absolutely right in that.
yeah.
That's the beauty and terror of relationships, is that they are a gigantic mirror. And we're going to see
Yeah.
ourselves
What
reflected
what
back,
better
for better or
place
worse.
what better place to learn about yourself than in a relationship? Yeah. Well, Amanda, this has been amazing. I'll get to your website in here in just a second, but before we do that, is there anything else that you would like to say that you haven't had a chance to say today on anything?
I think we covered a lot in a really short time.
Yeah, I do
I would
too.
just say that um, there are some depths to what we touched on today that I want to just honor. If you're on this journey and you're dating or you're in relationships, or you're coming out of one that felt really difficult, that relationships are complex, and they're comparing yourself to something, whether it's a relationship on television, something you see in media, or somebody that you know, is never going to serve you. And so there's a lot of complexity to relating. It's the beauty of humanity, of being a human, that we're both simple, but we're also deeply complex. And so if there's something that you heard today where you're like, wow, if only it was that easy, just take a breath.
Where's
Like,
that easy button?
we skimmed over some big things
We did. We
today.
did.
Yeah. And there's depth to these topics that we just, it would take hours and hours to really go into. But yeah, just continue again with that curiosity. If something really came up that was like a little bit triggered something in you that's like, ooh, I didn't like hearing that about, or I loved hearing that, I want more. That curiosity is an invitation.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think we did skim over a lot of this. We could really go in depth too. But Amanda, it's been a pleasure having you here today. How can folks get a hold of you? Do you have any books or webinars or workshops or any of that coming up?
Sure. Well, the best way to find me is probably a combination of either social media or my website. So you can find me on Facebook and on Instagram. I'm under my own podcast handle, which is With the Lights on Instagram. You can find me there. My website is amandamonk.net. And so pretty easy to find me there. And yeah, feel free to reach out, send a message, make a comment. anything like that. I don't have any webinars coming up between now and the end of the year. I'm about to head to Disneyland with my kiddos, and
Oh,
then I'm moving house, and so I'm kind of in a bit of a pause
oh, okay.
for a few months. Yeah, but I do have a membership program that I'm starting to build that isn't available yet, but it's coming.
Okay.
And so I would just say stay tuned, watching my social media and my website for information on that in the fall.
Okay, well, I will put all of that in the show notes too, and yeah, continue to pump that out on my social media channels. So, Amanda, this has been amazing. I feel like I got a mini coaching slash seminar or my own personal webinar here today. A little bit. It's definitely some eye openers for me. For anyone watching, thank you so much. And if you're so inclined to share this episode, you think you got something out of it, I would super appreciate it. The more that we can get this message out, again, about my message to the world about living happy, healthy, and inspired. And certainly part of that does include healthy, happy, inspired relationships, whether it's romantic or even at work or any of that. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Please hit that subscribe button as well. And until next time, live happy, healthy, and inspired, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.